Hello to all the students. Myself, Dr. Shilpi Agarwal, and we will be discussing the anatomy questions of your exam FMG June 2021. Now, all these questions are on recall basis. The question content, the options content, all are on recall basis. So there can be some disparity between the options which are being given by one student and the other student. But what we will do is that we will consider all the options over here and we will discuss the basic concept so that if any other option is also being asked, you should be able to answer that question. Now, before I start, I would like to say that the one thing which is most important, which I always keep saying in my classes, that the basic concept is very important. The basic concept is the most important thing, that is the building stone. So if you have a basic concept of everything like we have discussed in the anatomy, so you will be able to answer all the questions, and in fact like we have discussed almost all the points in our notes as well as in the images. All the images have been discussed, so you will be able to answer everything, every point if they are asked in one way or in another. Now over here in the anatomy, the one-liner questions were asked and as well as the clinical questions were also asked. Those were the integrated questions, and in our CCD classes like clinical case discussions, we have felt that element and we have discussed a lot of things clinically in a clinical pattern. So the students who have attended those classes, they must have been able to answer the various questions. Okay, now we will be starting with this questions over here. So let us start with this question which we have discussed a lot of times again and again, and this question was asked in the previous paper also, and now it is repeated. So as I always said, there should be zero error in a repeated question. So the question which is repeated, it should never go wrong. And in this question, in the previous paper, the lentiform nucleus was being asked, and now they have asked all other components also. So let us see the various components first of all, and then we will come back to this question. Now if you see this various component, like we have talked in the classes about this schematic image, we always make it so that you can remember all the elements. You know that when you are making a diagram yourself, when you have in your notes these schematic diagrams, you are able to memorize it more perfectly. So let us see over here. In this, I mentioned you earlier also that whenever we are talking about these sections of the brain, either it is a coronal section or it is a horizontal section, the nucleus will remain the same. The orientation of the structures will remain the same. If the section is horizontal, like it has been asked in this question, what is there? The three nucleus is there. On the outermost side, as you can see over here, the triangular nucleus. This one is the triangular nucleus, which is the lentiform. This is a lentiform nucleus. On the medial side, you are having this round nucleus, caudate, and this big oval-shaped nucleus, which is the thalamus. Now we say the structure which is sandwiched between these nucleus, this yellow-colored structure which I have shown over here, this is the internal capsule. Okay, this is the internal capsule. So these were the various options which were given. Apart from this, you have a option insular cortex. Let us discuss. Now if you see this image over here, very well, again on the lateral side you are having this triangular nucleus which is lentiform. On the anterior side, caudate, and this big oval nucleus, thalamus. This in between this V-shaped structure, this is internal capsule. And now where is the insular cortex? The insular cortex is outer to lentiform nucleus. It is outer to lentiform nucleus. So this portion as well as this portion over here, this is the insular cortex. Now if I come back to the options over here, let us come back to the options. Let us first of all concentrate over here. What is the A option? This is A, this is B, this is C, and this is the D. A, you can clearly tell, is caudate nucleus. B I'm writing over here, B is thalamus. What is C? C is lentiform. Okay, it is the lentiform nucleus. And what is D now? The D is an area which is lateral to the lentiform. It is actually the insular cortex which is dipping in from outside, from the lateral sulcus. And now this area over here, if I say this area over here where the arrow has been put, this is insular cortex. Many students have said that internal capsule if I say the internal capsule is also given in the option, then the arrow would have been over here. The arrow would have been at this point. If I say the arrow is at this point, or it is at this point, I will just zoom it out, or at this point. All these areas are the areas of V-shaped internal capsule. So if the arrow is between these nucleus, then you will go for internal capsule. So let us come back over here in the various options, and if you see these various options, now this time they have asked in this manner, A is this one, B is this one, C is this one, and now actually this is the pattern which is followed in the NEET or in the AIIMS exam. So definitely they have asked such kind of question in this manner, because slowly the exam pattern is changing. So because we were already equipped for this, so either they ask the question in this manner or in a simple manner, we were able to answer it. So the answer of this question is A. It is the A. Now let us move on to the other question, which was again this image based question. Now this was on axillary artery. The axillary artery present in the axilla, and again we have just seen this image. This image we have seen so many times in our classes, and if you see, we have mentioned that its extent of the axillary artery is from this outer border of first rib and till the lower border of this teres major, right? And this artery is divided into three parts with the help of this muscle. This is the muscle which is present over here, and which muscle is this one? This muscle is pectoralis minor. This is a pectoralis minor which divides this artery into three parts. So you should be able to identify the three parts over here. If I talk about the three parts, in the three parts, the portion which is above and medial to the pectoralis minor is the first part. The portion deeper to the muscle is the second part, and the rest of the portion over here, this portion which we say is lateral and below the pectoralis minor, this is the third part. So now if you are able to identify these parts, you will be able to answer the arteries also. Regarding the branches, for the branches, as we have already know, the branches from the first part, there are one branch from the first part, two branches from second part, three branches from the third part. Which is the first branch? It is the superior thoracic artery. It is from the first part. Then you have thoracoacromial and the lateral thoracic artery from the second part, and subscapular, anterior and the posterior circumflex artery from the third part. Now the question is how you will identify it. Now if we ask that how you will identify it, very simple to identify, very simple. Let us come to the first part. We know that this is the first part and only one artery will come from here, right? Only one artery will come from here, that will be the superior thoracic. Another way you should be able to know, the name is superior thoracic. The word itself says that it will go and supply the superior part of the thorax. So that means it should go over here. It should go down towards the thorax. So same thing is happening. This artery is going down towards the thorax. This is the superior thoracic artery. Now coming to the second part, if I say this is the second part, so let us focus over here in the second part. In the second part, two arteries are given. One is going like this, another is going like this. Now the one which is going above like this is thoracoacromial, and the second which is going along this lower border of the pectoralis minor, or we say it runs along this lateral aspect of the chest wall. So this artery is given the term as lateral thoracic artery. As the name suggests, lateral part of the thoracic region or the thorax. So lateral thoracic artery. Now let us come to the third part. This is, if I say this is the third part, in the third part, one branch going like this and the other two branches, they are going like this. Now this branch which is going lower is the subscapular artery. This is a subscapular artery. It goes below and it goes slightly posterior towards the subscapular region. Apart from this, the other two arteries, if you can see, they are going laterally. They go laterally over here towards the surgical neck of humerus, and they go anterior and posterior to it. So if you see, if I say that over here we have this humerus, if I say that I have humerus over here in this manner, so these arteries, they are anastomosing at the level of surgical neck of humerus. So they are present on the lateral side. Now you can identify all these arteries over here. If I come back to this question over here, let us see the various options. Let us focus on this question first of all, A, B and C. Okay, A, B and C over here. Now the A artery over here, the A is superior thoracic. The A is superior thoracic. As you can see, this artery is going like this from the first part. Now this artery, which is marked as B is lateral thoracic. It is a lateral thoracic artery. And now this one, this is coming from the third part, and this C will be the subscapular. This is the subscapular artery. So now you have identified all the arteries. You have to just identify the correct option. And over here, if I see which is the correct option, so A is the correct option. This is the correct combination. Now, some students have said that over here only, like they have mentioned A is this, B is this, C is this, and we have to say that all except. In the question, all except was given. Even if all except was given or the options are given in this pattern, the answer will remain the same, the concept will remain the same. If you know the concept, you will be able to answer the question in either of the ways. So, clear the basic concept. Now coming to the next question. Now this question was on thoracolumbar fascia. In the thoracolumbar fascia, if you see this image which is given is the thoracolumbar fascia. And first of all, let us see the thoracolumbar fascia and then we will come back over here. Now this is the image showing the thoracolumbar fascia. If you see, this is the back region of a person, and towards the lower back you are having this fascia which is present over here, as you can see, which has been marked. This is the thoracolumbar fascia. And now what is thoracolumbar fascia, what muscles it is covering, what are its layers? Then for that we will take a transverse section over here, and if I take a transverse section, now it appears like this. So now let us come to this transverse section. In the transverse section, we can very well say this is the anterior side, this is the posterior side. Okay, first of all, you should be able to identify the anterior and the posterior side. So if you see over here, the section of the vertebra is there. The spinous process will help us tell that this is the posterior side, and this body of the vertebra will help us to identify that this is the anterior side. After identifying the anterior and the posterior aspect of the image, now let us go to the various structures. Over here I say that for the thoracolumbar fascia, one layer is this one. Okay, one layer is this one. Another layer is this one. And the third layer is this one. These are the three layers of thoracolumbar fascia, and they are named according to its location. What will be the location? The anterior one is known as anterior, the posterior one is known as posterior, and the middle one is known as middle. So if we see over here, this one is anterior layer, this one over here, this is the middle layer, and this one over here, this one is the posterior layer of this thoracolumbar fascia. So this thing you should be able to identify. And now after this, what are the muscles which are lying between these two layers? If I say between the anterior and the middle layer, the muscle which we are having over here, this muscle which we are having is the quadratus lumborum. The muscle which is present between the middle and the posterior layer, that is this muscle over here, this is the erector spinae muscle. So these are the muscles which are enclosed over here, and we say that as the anterior and the middle layer, they are merging on the lateral aspect. Over here you are having the attachment of these muscles which we say are the external oblique, internal oblique, and transversus abdominis. Okay, this is the transversus abdominis, then you have internal oblique, then external oblique. Now apart from this, as you go anteriorly, you see one more muscle. Now that will create a confusion, so you should be knowing about that too. The muscle which you can see over here, this muscle, it is the psoas major muscle, and there is a fascia which is covering that too. And now the fascia which is covering this psoas major muscle is, this is given the term as psoas fascia. So now you completely know about this region. Let us come back to the question. Now let us come back to the question. If we see this image over here, now you can understand this image perfectly. What are the layers? I will just draw it. One layer is this one, another layer is this one, and third layer is this one. These are the three layers. And if you see A, B, C which are marked, so A will be anterior layer, B will be middle layer, C will be the posterior layer. And If you see over here, the anterior and the middle layer, they are actually attached to the transverse process of the vertebra, and the posterior layer is having one attachment towards the spinous process. So these are the layers, and if I come back to the question, I have to find this correct option over here. The correct option over here is A, that is A, B, C. So this is for the thoracolumbar fascia. One more image-based question which have been asked, which we continuously talk about in our classes, is genioglossus muscle. Now, if you see this sagittal section of the head and neck over here in the oral cavity, okay, if this is a sagittal section, this is actually the sagittal section taken like this, and when you see in the oral cavity, which is the major structure over here, tongue, and which is the main muscle forming the tongue, that is genioglossus. How the genioglossus is present? If I say that this is the hard palate, this is the hard palate, this is the soft palate, this is a section of the mandible, and now there is a muscle which is actually going towards the tongue in this manner. Okay, it is going into the tongue in this manner. You can in fact see the fibers going like this. Now these are the fibers of genioglossus muscle, which is forming the main mass of this tongue, and the answer of this question is genioglossus. If you see this image, which we have repeatedly discussed in our classes, now in this image you can see we have talked about this muscle, and this is the muscle which has been marked in the question. So the fibers which are going like these are the fibers of genioglossus. In the other options, if you see, they have written styloglossus, hyoglossus, and the palatoglossus. These three are the other muscles of the tongue which are coming from the different points. Like we say, stylo will be coming from the styloid process, hyo will be coming from the hyoid bone, palato will be coming from the palate. So the direction of the fibers will be different. Genio means the genio, it is coming from the genial tubercles of the mandible, which is present on the inner aspect of the mandible. Okay, so now this is the genioglossus muscle. Now, a very important question over here. The question is, a patient presented with injury to the bulbar urethra, it will lead to extravasation of urine in which area? This is a very important question because you need to understand the arrangement of the fascias over here, and then you will be able to answer this question. Now over here, few students were saying that there is a question, this question had that they said the injury is to the bulbospongiosus. If the injury is to the bulbospongiosus, that means the injury is to this muscle which actually surrounds the bulb of the penis, and in that, the urethra which is present in that portion is actually named as bulbar urethra. So in either way, they are talking about the injury of the bulbar urethra. Now when I talk about the options, these were the options, and apart from this, some students, they have also mentioned the options like, I will write scrotal sac, or the option is thigh. So these other options were also told. So we will consider all the options over here and we will find the best answer. So even if other options are given or these options are given, you should be able to find the correct answer. Now before we go for this, you should be able to know the parts of the male urethra. When we talk about the male urethra, we actually divide it into anterior urethra and the posterior urethra. So in the anterior urethra, when we are talking about anterior urethra, for the anterior urethra, we are having these two parts. One is the bulbar urethra, another is the penile. And when we talk about the posterior urethra, when we talk about this posterior urethra, then we say that it is having two parts, prostatic and membranous. Okay, I'm just sticking over here. The prostatic is the one running through the prostate. Membranous is the one which is passing through the urogenital diaphragm. So we say that there is a urogenital diaphragm which is present over here, and it is having the various muscles, and the portion over here we say is the deep perineal pouch. How will you understand the deep perineal pouch? For that, let us take a coronal section of this area, and when we talk about this coronal section, now this will be showing you these areas, that is the pouches, the membranes. Now over here, what you have to understand is, one layer is this, I will just focus it more, another layer is this, and the third layer is this. These are the three layers. These are the basic layers which you should be knowing. Now the layer which is on this deeper side, this is the most deeper side, is the inferior, or we can say like it is the superior fascia of the urogenital diaphragm. It is on the superior side, so this is the superior fascia of urogenital diaphragm. Then this one over here is the inferior fascia of urogenital diaphragm, which is also known as perineal membrane. And as we come lower down, now this fascia which I have shown over here is the Colles fascia. Okay, now the area which is between the upper two fascias, this area is given the term as the deep perineal pouch. This is the deep perineal pouch. And the area which is on the outer side, that is this one area, this is the superficial perineal pouch. Now if I say the deep perineal pouch, which part of the urethra is present over here? So over here you have the membranous urethra. And when we come to the superficial perineal pouch, which part of urethra is present over here? It is the bulbar urethra. So that means if the injury is to the bulbar urethra, the extravasation of the urine will be in the superficial perineal pouch. If the injury is to the membranous urethra, then the extravasation of the urine will be in the deep perineal pouch. So if I simply mention this, that if the injury is to membranous urethra, then the extravasation of the urine is in deep perineal pouch. And if we say bulbar urethra, then in the superficial perineal pouch. This basic thing you should be knowing. And after this, what you need to know is that where can this urine go? When we talk about the membranous urethra, then apart from deep perineal pouch, it can go up. So let us see over here what can happen. It can come in this deep perineal pouch. Apart from this, it can go over here also. So we say it goes into the extraperitoneal space, which is around the prostate and the bladder. So this happens in the membranous urethra injury. If I talk about the bulbar urethra injury, which is asked in this question, so what will happen? If the injury is over here, the urine will be going into this superficial perineal pouch. And apart from this, let us see this image. And apart from this, I will just focus it more. If the injury we have said is over here, we have mentioned that it is going to the superficial perineal pouch. Now, if the injury is more, the urine can also go to the other portions. What are the other portions? So it can go to the scrotum, the scrotal sac. It can go towards the near the penis, and apart from this, it can go towards the anterior abdominal wall. Now the fascias, the Colles fascia and the Scarpa fascia, they are arranged in such manner that posteriorly the Colles fascia, if you see this Colles fascia, I will just mark it. This is the Colles fascia and this is the perineal membrane. So posteriorly what is happening, the Colles fascia, it combines with the perineal membrane and the urine is not going posteriorly to the ischiorectal fossa. And if I talk about the thigh portion, the urine is not going towards the thigh portion. It is only going to some extent over the upper portion of thigh, and that we say due to the Holden's line, where this Scarpa's fascia, it is attached at the fascia lata. Okay, it is attached to the fascia lata. So till that point only. So that is till the uppermost, very uppermost region of the thigh. So it is not going ultimately into the whole of the thigh portion. If I talk about the anti-abdominal wall, as it is going towards the anti-abdominal wall over here, it will go till the umbilicus only. Because the Scarpa fascias and the campus fascia, they will fuse at the level of umbilicus. So the extravasation will be till the umbilicus only. So over here, after understanding all this concept, if I come back to the question over here, if I come back to this question, now let us see the options. We have said bulbar urethra. So what can be the answer? The superficial perineal pouch, the urine can go over here. Scrotal sac, yes, it can go over here. It will not go to the deep perineal, it will not go around prostate, it will not go around the ischiorectal fossa. It can go to some extent to some part of thigh, okay. Though we will not consider it, but it can go. But we say that very less portion to the thigh, so we are excluding thigh. Now, we have to decide best answer between the superficial perineal pouch and scrotal sac. So as I told you, first of all, the urine will go towards the superficial perineal pouch. If the extravasation is more, if the rupture is more, then it will go to the scrotal sac, then to the penis, and then to the anti-abdominal wall. So we will go for the first location where the urine will go. And the best answer for this question will be superficial perineal pouch. So this will be the answer for this question. Now coming to the next question over here, this question was that the suturing has been done in the fingers and the hand over here. And what happens that after this, the patient complains that there is inability to flex this middle finger. He's unable to flex the middle finger. Now this can be due to the injury of which structure? Now for this you should be knowing about the median nerve, about the various tendons over here which we have repeatedly discussed in the classes. I will just show you these notes over here. We will just quickly see. When we talk about the median nerve over here, we say that the median nerve, when it is running down, it gives off the anterior interosseous nerve. In the forearm it is giving the branches. And what are the branches in the forearm? As you can see over here, it is giving over here the branches to the pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, flexor digitorum superficialis, and the anterior interosseous nerve is giving branch to flexor digitorum profundus, flexor pollicis longus, pronator quadratus. And if you see over here, these branches are given in the forearm above the flexor retinaculum. Take this point, above the flexor retinaculum. Now as the nerve passes beneath the flexor retinaculum, now it is giving the rest of the branches in the hand to the lumbricals and the thenar muscles. These point to be noted. Now after this we have also discussed that when the lesion is higher, then in the higher lesions all these deformities are occurring, in which you have this benediction deformity also, in which we say that there is inability to flex these lateral two fingers. Right? And when we talk about the lesion at the B, that is at the level of flexor retinaculum, then these deformities are not present, only the ape thumb deformity, or we say the thenar atrophy is there. Apart from this, we have also discussed about the tendons. If I talk about the tendons, what you should know is that where they will insert. Now when I talk about this flexor digitorum superficialis tendon, for this we say it is attached to the middle phalanx. And due to this, it will bring about flexion at metacarpophalangeal joint and proximal interphalangeal joint. The question which has been asked over here was about flexor digitorum profundus, and if I talk about this, it is attached to the distal phalanx, due to which it brings about flexion at all the joints, at metacarpophalangeal, proximal interphalangeal, distal interphalangeal. And the other muscle is flexor pollicis longus. If the word says pollicis, that means it is going to the thumb. Okay, so we have discussed all the aspects over here. Let us come back to the question over here, and one by one we will discuss each option. First is median nerve. That is the most possible answer over here. Let us discuss other option. One is flexor pollicis longus. Because it is going to the thumb, we will not consider it, because we are actually talking about the middle finger. Okay, so we can rule it out. Flexor digitorum profundus. For this we say that this muscle, if it is paralyzed, of course it will not lead to this flexion at this finger. Okay, it will not lead to the flexion at this finger. But if you see the other options over here, the flexor retinaculum. For the flexor retinaculum, we have talked that if the lesion is at this level, this flexion deformity will not be present. So this we have ruled out. Now if I talk in detail about this, we have already said that if these interphalangeal joints are there, if this is the MCP, this is the PIP, and this is the DIP. If I say due to the flexor digitorum profundus, all these flexions are lost. But now I say these two joints, at these two joints, the flexor digitorum superficialis is also helping to bring about the flexion. And this muscle is not affected over here. As the option says, they are saying only flexor digitorum profundus. So if this muscle is spared, so it will keep bringing or it will keep acting on these joints. So the flexion at the finger will be possible due to the flexor digitorum superficialis, which is spared. Now what is the possibility in which both the muscles should be involved? What can be the possibility? The possibility is only the median nerve. The possibility is only the median nerve. In the median nerve, both the flexor digitorum superficialis and the profundus will be paralyzed, leading to inability to flex this middle finger. So therefore the answer of this question is median nerve. Now the next question, a newborn patient, a newborn baby has presented with a congenital anomaly having the cleft lip. What is the embryological basis behind it? Again, this thing we have discussed a lot of times. When we talk about the formation of the lip, in the formation of the lip, the upper lip is formed by two components. The central part is being formed by the medial nasal process, which is a part of frontonasal process. The lateral parts of the upper lip, it is formed by maxillary process. And if I talk about the lower part of the lip, it is formed only by mandibular process. And if there is non-fusion between the medial nasal process and the maxillary process, it will lead to this cleft lip. It will lead to the cleft lip. So if we see these options over here, we can very well see the B option is the one. A we can rule out. When we talk about the C option, we can rule out because it is talking about the palatine shelf. It will actually lead to the cleft palate. And the fourth option over here is also pointing towards the cleft palate. So the only option is B, and this is the answer of this question. Now talking about this question, Killian's dehiscence, this was also a repeated question. In the previous paper they have asked it is present in which muscle. So it is present in inferior constrictor. Now they have asked in between which parts. So it is actually the parts of inferior constrictor muscle. So as we have discussed already in the classes, over here for the Killian's dehiscence, we say it is present between the two parts of the inferior constrictor muscle. And if we see this inferior constrictor, we say the fibers which are running obliquely like this, these are thyropharynges, and the other set of fibers is running like this horizontally, and that is cricopharynges. In between these two fibers, there is a small potential space or the small potential area. Over here we say a weak area because the less number of fibers are there, and that area is given the term as Killian's dehiscence. And if any weak area is there, we say that becomes a potential site for the formation of a diverticulum. So the pharyngeal diverticulum can be formed over here at the Killian's dehiscence. So basically what you should know is that the Killian's dehiscence is between thyropharynges and cricopharynges. So the answer of this question will be C. The answer of this question will be C. Corticospinal tract, very important. It crosses at what level? Now when we are talking about this corticospinal tract, as we have discussed over here, we use these schematic images to study all these tracts. We know that when it is descending down, it crosses at the level of medulla. Now at what level of medulla? So when we are talking about at what level of medulla, so we say at the upper level of medulla it forms a prominence known as pyramids, and then it crosses at the lower part of the medulla and it goes to the other side. So the answer of this question will be that it crosses at the level of lower medulla. Now this another question was asked which was regarding the referred pain. In the angina pectoris, which nerve is involved in radiation of the chest pain to the left arm? So if the angina pectoris is there, the pain is in the precordial region, but the pain is also referred to the left arm, and that too on the inner side. Now this we say it depends. For this you should have the knowledge of the dermatomes of the upper limb, which we have already discussed. And when we are talking about the dermatomes of upper limb, what is the importance of this knowledge? I will just tell you. When you are talking about the pain carried by the various nerves from the heart. Now the nerves which are responsible are the cervical cardiac nerves and the thoracic splanchnic nerve, and then they go towards the sympathetic region, and from there we say the main fibers or the main spinal nerves which are responsible for that is mainly T1 to T4. Okay, T1 to T4 spinal nerves are responsible, and we will be looking to the area where the T1 and T4, from T1 to T4 the area is being supplied. So the pain will be referred to the area of T1 to T4. So this T1 to T4 is the one which we have to look for, and when we look the dermatomes over here for the upper limb region, we very well know that this is the area by T2 and this is the area by T1. And when we talk about this T2 spinal nerve, for the T2 spinal nerve we say that it is having a lateral cutaneous branch. It is having a lateral cutaneous branch which is longer, and it goes till this axilla, and it is actually supplying this region that is given the term as intercostobrachial nerve, and specifically it is only having the root value T2. It is a branch of the T2 only. So when we are talking about this region, we say it is specifically the intercostobrachial nerve region. So if we see this region for the cutaneous nerves, for the various cutaneous nerves, we can very well see that towards the axilla, or you can say inner aspect of this left arm, it is specifically towards the left side. We are having which nerve which is responsible for that? The nerve responsible over here is this intercostobrachial nerve, having the root value only T2. Now, if I talk about the other options like musculocutaneous nerve and other cutaneous nerves, the musculocutaneous nerve, it actually gives off a cutaneous branch which is supplying the lateral cutaneous region of the forearm. That is the lateral cutaneous nerve of forearm. So it is a totally different region, and it is C5 and C6, so totally different nerve roots. For other points, we are having medial cutaneous nerve of arm, and then you also have medial cutaneous nerve of forearm. And these are also having a different distribution, and we say the nerve root responsible over here is C8T1, C8T1. Okay, so specifically we cannot say that completely these nerves are responsible for the pain in this area. And if I see the various options over here, the best answer for this question will be intercostobrachial nerve. It will be the intercostobrachial nerve if I correlate all the options. Another question regarding the blood supply of the tonsil. Now, when we are having this question, when we talk about the tonsil, actually, the tonsil is supplied by a lot of arteries. It is supplied by a lot of arteries. As you can see this image over here, this is the tonsil, and you can see the arteries are coming from different directions. All are coming from the branches of external carotid artery, and they will be supplying the palatine tonsil. So you have a supply from facial artery, from the maxillary artery, from the ascending palatine. So as you can see over here, this is actually the lingual artery which is giving supply to the tonsil. This is the facial artery which is supplying further, and this is the ascending pharyngeal artery which is also giving a branch. This one is maxillary artery which is also giving a branch. All are giving branches to the tonsil, but over here we say the main is facial. The main is the facial, so the main supply is by the facial artery, and its branch which is reaching over here, which main branch? Tonsillar artery. The main branch is tonsillar artery. It is tonsillar artery, which is a branch of facial artery which is having a main supply to the tonsil. So if I come back to this question over here, what I can see is that the various options which are being mentioned over here, if you see the various options, all are supplying the tonsil. But we have to mark the best answer. So the main artery over here is tonsillar artery. The main artery over here is a tonsillar artery, and this is the answer of this question. Now in this question it says, during the lumbar puncture, after piercing which structure the needle will reach to the epidural space. Now over here you should be very well aware of the ligaments which are present between the vertebra. And as we have already a lot of time talked about this vertebra over here, when we talk about the basic structures of the vertebra, if this is the basic structure over here, okay, I'm just drawing a schematic image. If these are the basic structures, we know this is the body, this is transverse process, this is spinous process, and this portion is lamina. Okay, this portion is lamina. Now when we are talking about these vertebrae, we actually say the ligaments which are between the tips of the spinous process. This is the tip of the spinous process. The ligament which is between the tips of the spinous process, at this location you are having supraspinous ligament. You have the supraspinous ligament. The ligament which is present between the rest of the part of spinous process, that means at this location it will be given the term as interspinous ligament. That is between the spinous process. Now after this, the another ligament which is located over here, okay, which is almost located over here, it is actually between the lamina of the vertebrae from upper and the down side. Now this ligament over here is ligamentum flavum. It is a ligamentum flavum, and when we are talking about the ligamentum nuchae, which is given in the option, it is only present in the upper aspect. That is, we say in the cervical or the neck portion. So it is only present in the cervical portion. When we are talking about the lumbar puncture, we are actually going to the lumbar region, that is most probably to the junction between the L3 and L4. So the ligamentum nuchae, we can easily exclude that. I will exclude this ligamentum nuchae, and now if I put the needle from outside, now you can yourself tell that what will be the order in which you will pierce the ligaments. So for now, for that we can see this image over here. In this, the lumbar puncture needle has been put, and what are the layers which will be pierced. So one by one if we go, first of all the skin, Then we pierce the subcutaneous layer and the various back muscles. Now coming to the ligaments, what are the ligaments which are being pierced over here? First of all, supraspinous, then interspinous and ligamentum flavum. And as it pierces this ligamentum flavum, so if you see the location, this is the supraspinous, this one is interspinous, and at this location you are having the ligamentum flavum. Now as it inserts as it pierces this ligamentum flavum, it will reach to this meninges, that is the outermost meninges is the dura mater. It will pierce the dura mater and will reach to the epidural space. It reaches to the epidural space, and after reaching the epidural space, if I talk about the spinal anesthesia, it will pierce the arachnoid matter and then it will reach to the subarachnoid space. So that will be the complete order. So this is about the lumbar puncture, usually done at the junction of L3, L4, and these are the all layers which we have just mentioned, which will be pierced by this lumbar puncture needle. So now by this we come to a conclusion that the answer of this question, it will be clearly ligamentum flavum. It will be clearly ligamentum flavum. Now another question which is a very commonly asked question is the abductor of the vocal cord. Now when you are talking about the abductor of the vocal cord, only one muscle is there which is the abductor of the vocal cord, and that is posterior cricoarytenoid. The posterior cricoarytenoid, when we are seeing these muscles over here in the larynx region, so the posterior cricoarytenoid is this muscle which is present over here. And when we view the larynx from superior aspect, so from the superior aspect, as we can see, this is the posterior cricoarytenoid which is present over here between the cricoid cartilage and the arytenoid cartilage. And now when it contracts, what happens? When it contracts like this, the vocal cords which are present anterior to it, this is the location of the vocal cords. So what happens? The vocal cords will go away. Okay, they go slightly away. And when the vocal cords they go away, it is given the term as abduction. So the vocal cords as they go away, we are having one muscle which is helping in the abduction, and that one muscle is posterior cricoarytenoid. Thereby it is also given the term as safety muscle of larynx. Other muscles which have been mentioned in the options for that, adduction. When we talk about adduction, the vocal cords coming closer, that is by lateral cricoarytenoid and this transverse arytenoid. If I talk about the tension means the lengthening of the vocal cords, that is by cricothyroid, and relaxer, or we say the shortening, the vocal cords they are shortened, this is by thyroarytenoid and vocalis. So these are about the other options. So the answer of this question is posterior cricoarytenoid. Now this question, very easy question, there should be zero error in this. All the following cartilages, they are paired except. So when we are talking about these, we can very well see the unpaired cartilages, they are present in the central line over here. The one which is present over here is, I will just focus it, this one is thyroid. Then just below it you are having this cricoid cartilage, and if you see over here this one, or if you see from the inner aspect this one, this is the epiglottis. So these three are the unpaired, and when we talk about the paired ones, let us see over here the paired ones. You are having this arytenoid, then the corniculate, and just above it over here you are having the cuneiforms. So these are the paired ones. So when we are talking about the cartilages, these are the unpaired and these are the paired ones which we have just mentioned. So now let us go back to the question over here. If I just go back to the question, we have to say all except, it is all except. So now this is paired, cuneiform, arytenoid and corniculate. All these are paired, but the thyroid, it is unpaired. So that means the answer of this question will be thyroid cartilage. It is a thyroid cartilage. Now there was one more question regarding this cartilage. They said the cartilage which does not ossify. Now over here all the cartilages of the larynx are mentioned, and if I talk about this cartilage, whenever we are talking about the cartilage, we actually divide the cartilage into the three types. It is the hyaline, elastic, fibrocartilage. And when we are talking about these all cartilages, we say it is the hyaline cartilage which can undergo calcification with age. So over here, when we are talking about the laryngeal cartilages, we should be able to differentiate that which is the hyaline and which is the elastic. So when we talk about the hyaline, thyroid, the thyroid cartilage, the cricoid cartilage and the base of arytenoid, these are hyaline cartilage. And when we talk about the elastic is epiglottis, and the rest of the cartilages, like we say the apex or the apical portion of the arytenoid, corniculate, and the cuneiform. So these are the elastic cartilages. So if I come back to the question, we have to basically look over here for the elastic cartilage, because the elastic cartilage is the one which will not ossify. And if I talk about the elastic cartilage, it is the epiglottis, which is the elastic cartilage. So it will not ossify, and the rest of the cartilages which are actually mentioned, they are hyaline cartilage in nature, so they can undergo ossification. Okay, so the answer of this question is epiglottis. Now one more question which was actually related to the ENT component, but over here you should be having a knowledge of the tonsillar bed. Now the question is, which nerve can be damaged in tonsillectomy? And the question was like extended question also, that there is a referred pain to the ear. So which nerve can be responsible? So over here when we talk about this tonsillar bed, this is the tonsillar bed. This is a view. We say this is the interior of the oral cavity, right? And if I say this is the tonsil over here, this is the location of the palatine tonsil. So as we go deeper into the palatine tonsil, we say the tonsillar bed is a structure, or say a term which is used for the structures which form this floor type of area or this fossa type of area on which the palatine tonsil is lying. Now what are the structures? What are the important structures immediately? So when we are talking about the important structures over here, we can say that you are over here having this buccopharyngeal over here. First of all, your pharyngobasilar fascia, then you are having superior constrictor, then you have the buccopharyngeal fascia, as well as if you go slightly outside, what you see, one artery important, that is a facial artery, and there is a nerve which is important over here, glossopharyngeal nerve. So these are the structures which are present in the tonsillar bed, apart from other deeper structures. And this nerve, glossopharyngeal nerve, it can be affected when this tonsillectomy is done. And the tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve is the one which is also supplying towards the middle ear. So this is the reason that when this nerve is affected, the referred pain will be there. As we have talked about the angina pectoris, the referred pain from the heart is towards the left arm, inner aspect of left arm. Similarly over here, the injury is at this point, but the pain is referred to the ear due to its common innervation. Okay, so the nerve which will be affected over here will be, of course, this glossopharyngeal nerve. So this is about all the recall questions over here, and soon we will be coming over with more of the topics which will be discussing in detail, so that you are clear with that. And my best wishes are always with you. Keep rocking like this only in your exams and in the future exams also. So bye to all of you.